I want to talk to you today about the blessing. And meaning the blessing, you can put on there, you are somebody. Now, I was thinking about this the last couple weeks. And we've been doing the addition to the house and doing a bunch of other stuff. And we were like, we got to just stay faithful. We're blessed people. And, we have little hiccups here and there. But who you are and you understand the blessing that God has given and set before you, none of those things are going to knock you off your track. You may be shaken, you may be shook. There may be tremors. But the bottom line is that you are a blessed person and you are somebody. So right now we're come to that end of the time right now in this country where everybody's gotten their tax return basically. Everybody's got their new shoes on the cars and all that stuff. Gold watches and all that stuff. Everybody's going out to eat every day. And sometimes, when we've done our taxes and it's changed over the years where it was just me and then I would, claim or whatever. And then, as we, some people would put, they claim somebody, some people would claim their dependents. Some of you put head of household. And that's what I want to talk to you about. You being the head of your house. And it doesn't matter if you're, a married couple. It doesn't matter if you're just by yourself. A man, woman, you are the head of your house. And comes with that, and you have children, because we're dealing with this, and we've talked about it over the years. And then we've seen as family members and friends and people we've known pass away, and you kind of see the struggle or the battle or all the stuff, and Pastor Larry and we have, all of you have had firsthand seen that, the different things that come with it, all the strife and the, I deserve this and I deserve that. Well, most of the time we have put together a will. You put together something dividing all your assets, and in that, you probably push, your house is going to this person, or they're going to have this car, so-and-so is going to take this car, or the bank accounts, I want you to divide it up, whatever I have, or sell it off, or, things like that. Everything is stated in that will. Why? So when my parents passed away, they have already set forth, they've laid it all out. Why? For my future. And that's what you're doing too, or you could be doing. You're doing it for your children's security in their future. You've done the life insurances, you're paying all those things. You've taken care of your stuff. You've collected things, items that are valuable. And these things, you're going to say, I'm giving this to you. You put it in writing, this is going to my child, this is going to somebody, this could be going to the dog, I don't know, however, whatever you're feeling. And that's for their future, their security. And this is going to provide for your children's future. And in this blessing that I'm talking about, it's very, back in the Old Testament, it was something that people wanted. A child, a descendant, or a child of the person, they wanted that blessing. It wasn't about the money, it wasn't about anything like that, it was a blessing. And God Himself has set up a will for you. He set up a will for me. And that will, it's called the covenant. And what is a covenant? Covenant is an agreement. It's a contract, it's a guarantee, it's a promise. To you, to me. So it says, we can turn to Genesis 28, verse 28. So God wrote a will for us, and He's put forth a covenant for us, a promise for us to secure our future. And these blessings in the Bible, they were for God's people. And so these blessings were to provide for their child's future, for His people. And in the Old Testament, as we're reading about Jacob and Esau, you can see that if you read the story, what it is that Esau was the older brother, and Jacob was the younger. And the thing about it is that Jacob understood about the blessing. So what the Bible says is that when Esau came in from the field and he was tired and weary and he was hungry, he came to his brother and said, "Hey, you got some stew there? Give me a bowl." And Jacob, being the smart man that he is, said, "You know what, I'll give you a bowl if you give me your blessing, your birthright." And you know what Esau did? He despised it. He did not think it was worth anything. At that moment, he put his physical wants more in front of his spiritual needs. So he said, "I'm famished and I'm about to die. Just give me the bowl, and what's my birthright going to do for me right now?" It's basically what he said. And Jacob said, "Swear to me that you will trade me this." And he did. And when I was thinking about that and I was reading the story and I talked to my coworkers at work and I see the struggles that they're going through with their kids, and they tell me about them, and I see the struggle that we have, even myself, trying to raise the two boys and my daughter, and you see them go through the everyday things, and you've been through it. You've been a youth once, and you catch just about everything that they do before they do it. And you tell them, "Well, this is going to happen when you do this, and this is going to happen when you do that." And sometimes they still do it. But in talking to these people, and I'm talking to my friends, and even talking to some people here in the church, how do I put this? It's hard to pass on something that you don't even have, or you don't even know how to transfer it into your life, into what you're doing. It's hard to pass on a blessing if you're not even operating in it, or don't even know what it is. And that right there, as I was talking to my friend, and he was telling me about my kids, that was popping into my mind. Well, you yourself understand the consequences. You yourself are the parent. And I'm telling you today, where you're not their friend, you're the parent. And if you're not operating as that parent, if you're not operating in that spiritual authority, if you're not operating in that blessing, how can you pass that on to your children? How do you expect your children to walk in the spiritual blessing or try to bless them when you don't even have it yourself? And how important is this thing called blessing? Just like we talked in Genesis 27, Jacob was, when you go to chapter 27, 35, you can see after Jacob had received the blessing from Isaac, Esau was begging for a blessing. Let's turn to 35, verse 35, 27, 35. And Esau heard the words of his father. He cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, me also, O my father." In 36 he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" In 38 he said, "Bless me, me also, my father." And Esau lifted up his voice and he wept. To not have a blessing at that time would make a grown man cry. And a lot of times we go through things and we're like, it's okay. But back then it meant everything.
That's right.
To not be blessed made Esau weep and cry and beg for what he had but did not operate in. In summary, the blessing is to enjoy and experience the promise, the covenant of God. It was experiencing and enjoying and extending the promises of God for your life in the future. Back then, this is the way people saw it in the Old Testament. The blessing was when God was operating for you. The curse was when God was operating against you. Now look at Genesis 25, verse 29. We start at 29 and go to 33. Now Jacob cooked the stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." And Esau said, "Look, I am about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" Then Jacob said, Swear to me as on this day." And so he did. And Esau, at the end of that verse, despised his birthright. Now the birthright was to the oldest son back then, and he got a double portion of everything.
Right.
So it didn't, if you looked at it, if you didn't have that blessing, you would still get double of everything. But how many times have you heard you have all the money in the world and not be happy?
That's right.
Or how many times you've bought everything and set everything up yourself, but it's for nothing at the end.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this blessing. Let's talk about this birthright. In Genesis 27:28. So Isaac was old and he was already losing his sight. He couldn't see his son, he could smell some. So when he smelled Esau, he could smell the earth, the field, the work of the land. And when he smelled Jacob, he didn't smell that. It was more inside. And your children, you have some children. I have some children like that. Some are outside and some are inside. But he said here, surely the smell of my son is like the smell of the field. Therefore, may God give you of the dew of heaven. May God give you of the dew of heaven, with the blessings rain down from heaven upon you. And he says, of the fatness of the earth, and the plenty of grain and wine. So, if it rains down from heaven, just like you're here, and you got a farm, they need that rain for their plants to grow, that crop to grow, right? You need that rain, that blessing, for you to move through this world in favor of God. So then he says, let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. How many of you have gone into somewhere and everything is set up for you? God moves you into this position, it's set up for you. You know? And you don't have to do anything. Just operate. That people serve you and nations bow down to you. Now he's talking about, because you're going to come against people that they're not going to like you. Because of who you serve. Everybody talks about it's who you are, but it's not that. It's who you serve. Right? When you're operating into the blessing, and you're operating in the covenant of God, it's who you serve. And that's what people don't like. Because they're not operating the same way. So God will move people. God will use people to prep everything for you. So if there's no rain in heaven, if there's no rain from heaven, nothing will grow. You can work that field, you can do all those things, nothing will grow. And if heaven doesn't visit the earth, how can the earth show up with anything? So, number 2, when we talked about God has told his people, when we talked about, sorry, I got off track. We talked about the nations that bow down to you and people will serve you. I wanted to go back and talk about when they left Egypt and he told his people, I want you to go to this land and it'll be filled with milk and honey. It will be flowing with milk and honey. That means that it's going to be highly productive. And what we didn't understand is that, and it kind of just opened up to me, because you know what? When they went over there and they looked at it and they saw, man, this land was plentiful. And you know what God did? He said, I'm going to get them to dig wells for you, water wells. He said, I'm going to get them to start prepping the land and start getting all this crop going. So when they went, they saw there was water. When they went, they saw there was fields of grapes. When they went, they saw it was in production. When they went, they saw it was already flowing with fruit. So God told his people, go, it's there waiting for you. And that's the covenant for your future. And what did they have to do? All they had to do was do what he said. And it was there waiting for them. He set up a will, and he set up this blessing. He set up this covenant. He set up this promise for you and what you're doing. He made you, Clarissa, an awesome singer. And he set up all those things for you. He gave you all the skills and the tools to do it. Mike and Larry, you guys talk. Al, you guys can talk and talk to anybody. God gave you those skills. God gave you those tools. So we see that people will serve you and the nations will bow down to you, and you will be their master. He says, you have authority because of my will, my covenant, my promise to you. And I wanted to touch a little bit about this part here because it goes into spiritual authority in this. And it says, think about it this way, because when you look in the Bible, they talk about a lot of farm action. Right? They talk about people having farms and cattle and things like that. But you know what? God gave Adam what? To start off, he gave him a garden.
Yes.
And he gave him dominion over that garden.
Yeah.
He didn't say, anything about, what Adam had, what skills he had. He gave him the garden and said, I want you to rule over this garden. So each one of you, God has given you a garden, an area to rule. A place in which you are to rule. Using your gifts and talents, your skills, and the opportunities that God has given you, or the opportunities that God has brought you or brings you. A place, this garden is a place where God wants to root you in order to serve his kingdom. All of you have a garden. All of you have a place where you call the shots. But what are you going to do with it? One of the greatest things in the world is to know that you have a place here on earth. There's a generation out here that they don't know that. There's a generation that they don't know where they belong. There's a generation that they don't know what they're going to do. We were talking to the kids yesterday. What are you going to do when you go to school? Why do you want to go to school? Why do you want to go to college? When you get out of college, what do you want to be? What is your job going to be? What is it? How many kids out there, they've never been asked that? How many kids out there, they've never been given the opportunity to get the tools to do that, to get where they need? And a lot of them think that they're a mistake. But I'm going to tell you, you're not a mistake. You're not an evolutionary mishap. there is a place for you here. God didn't leave you here to wander and bounce around like a pinball. There is a place for you to matter. When you're walking in the blessing and God has this covenant with you and you get put into a position by you only thinking, man, only God can put me here. Only God can move and get me to this spot. And you're going to have haters. You're going to have people that are going to try to knock you down. But I'm going to tell you one thing. If it is God-given, and I want you to think about this, they're going to have to slap God in order to knock you out. And I don't know about you, but I don't think I can do that. The biggest men in the world, I don't think they can do that. They're going to have to slap God down in order to knock you out of your spot. To knock you out of where God has you. So, you're going to have an opportunity here, because it doesn't matter if maybe when you were younger, your mom cursed you, when you were younger, your dad cursed you, or when you were older, even now. It doesn't matter if you went out somewhere and you left God and you walked away and you cursed yourself, because that can happen too. It doesn't matter. As long as you get back and you want God and you want to get back into that umbrella, that covenant, that promise is still there for you. As long as you want it. And like I said earlier, you might get shaken. There might be a tremor. But God got you covered. God got you covered. So let me tell you about this one last thing. We know that Esau was begging for what he had and lost. And you might think that even he didn't get nothing, but in actuality he did. Because God will not leave you behind. God will not forsake you. Just like he did not forsake Esau. And when we go further down to verse 39, after Esau was begging and weeping and crying out for a blessing, "You have nothing left for me," he said. And Isaac, his father, answered and said to him, "Behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. By your sword you shall live." So you're going to have to fight. "And you will serve your brother," because he had made that promise to Jacob. "And it shall come to pass, when you become restless, that you shall break his yoke from your neck." Have you ever heard the term that you will come out of the shadow of somebody? That's what he told him. You will gain back what you lost, but you're going to have to take the long route. You know, you're going to have to fight. That means that there will be a lot of temptation. There will be a lot of things, because you had already left God. So that temptation, it will be greater for you. That fight will be longer for you. But he said, and it shall come to pass when you become restless. When you say enough is enough, I will take up my sword. And he said that you shall break from his yoke. You will stand up and walk with me where you belong. And not grow weary. And I got one verse for you that you can take this. Because you might be thinking around, I don't know. I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. All that stuff. But when you get home, you're probably going to be like, hey, he was talking about this and he was talking about that. And you're going to see it. But I'm going to tell you right now, go to Deuteronomy 23:5. I'm going to read the second half of this verse. Nevertheless, because God's going to do what he's going to do. He says, but the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you. Because the Lord, your God, loves you. And in the beginning I talked about, when I first started talking, I talked about how we didn't understand. Some of us are not operating in the blessing. Some of us are not even understanding or transferring it into our lives. And you're going to say, how am I going to grab that? By building that relationship with Christ, as Pastor Mike said earlier. In Galatians 3:26 and 29, it says, God calls you his sons and daughters, and you are Abraham's seed. You are his descendants. And you want to check that? God told Abraham in Genesis 12, I am make you a great and mighty nation. And what did he do? He passed it on to his son. He passed it on to Isaac. He passed on that blessing. Then he said, then Isaac went ahead and you saw in Genesis, you saw him say, he passed it on to Jacob. And then Jacob passed it on to his 12 sons. And then through Judah came Jesus Christ, who is a great and mighty nation. So I want to tell you that you are somebody. Jeremiah 29:11 says, I have a plan for you. A destiny. Purpose. Power. You are somebody. God made that promise for you. God put it in his will. God made that covenant with you. Get back in it. Search all these things for you. They're here, waiting for you. A lot of times we hear that one famous story, I'm waiting on God. But he's waiting on you. Because as you see here, he already laid it out. He already made the promise. He's already passed on the blessings. Why haven't you? But it's all right. It's not too late. You can do that now. You can pass on the blessings. You can break the curses in your family. You can set up your children's future through the blessing. So it's time to operate it. It's starting to do it. Don't wait. Don't wait. Because then it'll be too late.